You're in the middle. Good afternoon, a very warm welcome. I like that some of you are like jigging your heads to the music, because this is a kind of homegrown piece of music that we've created using fabulous AI, obviously. So we set a test, or rather a game, one of our team away days, and said to 5 teams, come up with a jingle that we'll use at all our events. This was the one that was best voted and created by the gentleman over there that looks as if he's from Mad Max with thin tie. And so it's great. A very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Dharmendra Kanani. I'm Chief Operating Officer and Chief Spokesperson at Friends of Europe. And I have the privilege and honor to be discussing and debating with this glorious panel and people online. And also welcome to those of you who are watching online. Also, you are not forgotten. And it's good to have you both. We have 2 speakers online, but also this event is live streamed also. So welcome to all of those of you who are watching and listening also. Before I go into really introducing the event in earnest, there's a couple of things, is that we are doing this in partnership. This is kind of our 4th episode, if you like, with SSH. It's been a Horizon-funded project where we've been looking at this issue and the related issues over time. So this is almost like a culmination, if you like, of a series of debates linked to transition, climate action, climate change, and how to make sure it is just, fair, and inclusive. So that's the kind of background to why we're here in this context, in this particular context. I suppose one of the things that's important to note is those of you who are live streaming, if you do want to raise a question, just use hashtag FOE debate and post it in. And I'm making sure that just checking our online speakers, you can hear me. Just go yes. Great, wonderful, wonderful, great. So all good. Obviously, how can you avoid not commenting on what's happened at the weekend when we talk about the debate that we're just having now? I don't know about you. I was glued, and I wouldn't say I was joyous by any means whatsoever, but watching the kind of if you like, it felt like a roller coaster to a certain extent. You weren't sure what was going to happen, to the scale of it's going to happen, and suddenly you get what happened in Germany, East Germany in particular. The fact that the doubling of the vote in East Germany for an extreme right-wing party should send shudders down all of our spines and in our minds. And we should be woken up radically and progressively to think, how can it be that at the weekend when we celebrate D-Day, Europe and parts of Europe are going back to the ugliest ideology that tried to make sure, well, basically was trying to rid ourselves of freedoms, human rights, and a sense of ethnic cleansing. And here we are back, suddenly, with that ideology within the heart of Germany, in the east of Germany. And then you suddenly get the vote in France, and you think, really? Oh my goodness. And how a young, charismatic, good-looking guy can actually sway the motion and, cheer the crowds, and actually has created this wave of, I suppose, emotional attachment to what he's saying, because Marine Le Pen didn't have it, but she brings in, very cleverly, this very charismatic, good-looking chap who can speak the lingo of, the Zen generation, millennium generation, etc., all the younger, under 30-year-olds, if you like. And I suppose when that happened, then you suddenly, before you're going to bed, and you see that he's called a snap election and dissolved parliament, you think, oh my God, has he really done that? Has he really done that? And I was thinking to myself, it reminded me of the, thank you so much, the David Cameron moment. So those of you there's a lot of you who are young in this room, I'm not sure you remember, but some of you are nodding, that moment where he knew he had to go to the extreme, his 1922 committee, his job was on that balance, and in hanging, and they say, call a referendum. And he does. And he thinks people aren't going to vote in that direction the way that they did in the end. Took the biggest gamble in the history of the UK, other than what happened during the war and other parts. But wow, it was astonishing. It was eye-catching. And look where we are now, after the lies that were told. If you think about what's been happening in the right and the far right, and the lies that are being told, it was similar during the Brexit debate, that actually, migration became weaponized. Health services were blamed on those dirty little immigrants that are in the UK. And actually, if we drew the drawbids up from Europe, we'll control our borders and improve our health service. None of that's come out. In fact, immigration has gone through the roof. The health service is an absolute mess. And, there we go. It's created a toxic environment. Let's hope that doesn't happen here. I had to say that because I think all of us are thinking about it. And, there's no point not thinking or talking about it. I think it would be remiss of me to not have shared at least our thoughts on where we find ourselves. And we called it a sense of a broken contract, social contract. In Europe, it really feels like it, as if we've not got the social contract right. And I hope there's a day of reckoning where all politicians will take a long, hard look at themselves and realise that what's ahead of us is dangerous and potentially toxic, and that we ought to come together in a different way and coalesce and create a better Europe, a more just and more inclusive and fair Europe. But on that note, here we go. So on this topic, it's very, very clear, and it's quite also dismal facts that, only 1% of oil and gas companies are spending only 1% on low carbon technologies and low carbon investment. 1% of what they're earning, which is shocking and sad. Yet, if you look at it from the other point of view, since COVID and Ukraine, you've got nearly 14 million people in energy poverty. Now, that data is out of date already. It's probably more. So we're talking about a significant number of people currently do not have the money to actually heat their homes. Oh, look, I get another one. That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Talking about energy. There you go. Thank you very much. The other shocking fact is that whilst you've got that poverty, energy poverty going on, and the 1% of what energy companies are spending, oil and gas companies have had a bonanza in terms of profit. Absolute bonanza. They've earned more in the last 4 years than the last 10 years. And it's phenomenal. And just figure that out. They've earned more in the past 4 years than the past 10 in terms of profit. And that's a shocking, shocking fact. And it's not the case. Is it not true?
No, there's one exception.
Okay, all right. We can come back to that, Paula. I'll let you correct me. But in the main, I'm not going to quote the actual figures. You just need to know the aggregates. You'll find out yourself if you just go from various sources. But that is the case. And I think that we need to be mindful that there's a kind of background and a backstory to this debate on energy and a just transition. And if you go by certain markers, and what I mean by those markers is how much profit is going into the just transition, how much money is going into adaptation and enabling poor households to make sense of their lives. And when you think about the amount of money that's going into research and development, it's been ever thus. The EU lags behind 3 big areas, big countries, Japan, US, and China. We are around about below 10 or so in terms of the actual R&D. What I mean by that is the ratio of GDP towards our research and development. We're appallingly bad. But look at what happens in Japan and the US. They are racing ahead on green technologies in a way that we're not. Yet, we have every opportunity to grow green technology, and we have both the skill set and the ingenuity in Europe. We're just crap at scaling up. What happens is it gets taken by the Americans or the Japanese or elsewhere. So them's the kind of tale, if you like. And I'm going to first invite our first speaker, Paula. Paula, you're director of Just Transition, Consumers, Energy Security, Efficiency and Innovation at the European Commission. Director General for Energy. Wow, what a portfolio. Lovely to see you back again, as always. 9% of Europeans, 40 million Europeans, were affected by energy poverty, right? So we're actually able to heat their homes, and 10 million more compared to 2021. What are you doing about that?
Yes, thank you, and thank you so much.
Take the mic, would you?
Thank you
so much for the invitation. As I always say, I'm a friend of the Friends of Europe, and I really believe it's so important, the type of discussions, of debates that you're promoting. As you could just see from your introduction, really thank you also for the plain talking, because I think we need to hear this, and history repeats itself. And it's important to think of those crucial moments when where are we going? Now, I have the privilege and the challenge of, within the same department, bringing together these three pillars, which is affordability, sustainability, security. We always say that that's what we want to achieve in our energy system, is that we will still ensure security, that we will decarbonize and therefore sustainability, while having it just for all, so means also affordable. And I say it's a privilege, but it's also a challenge, because I can see on my day-to-day work how these three objectives very often do not converge. It's really difficult to square this circle. And then you add a fourth dimension, as if it was not hard enough, which is the competitiveness that you mentioned. So how can we make sure that as we decarbonize, that we will also make it in an affordable way, and that we still ensure that we have the lights on, right? And we've lived this over the past 2 years with a very, very serious energy crisis, which put these three really at the very core, with the security there, saying, well, the first concern is, let's make sure that we still have the energy to heat our homes, be it through the gas that we were no longer receiving, or alternative energy sources. But that was the most pressing urgency, and therefore we had to take a number of measures which were unprecedented, to the point of interfering with the profits precisely of the oil and gas companies. And the exception I was mentioning is Gazprom. Gazprom, for the first time in its history, has registered full losses in revenues last year, and this is a result of the sanctions. It's a result of what we are doing in terms of weaning off our dependence from Russian fossil fuels. But as we go, there is still this call, but yes, can we decarbonize while at the same time making it affordable? How much is this costing? And it is costing. It has a cost, and we need to be very frontal about it. It has a cost, and this cost has been politicized immensely. And you see, to some extent, also the result of that in the elections last weekend, where on a number of debates also linking to energy, the issue has been taken up and say, listen, we are asked to decarbonize, and look, we are asked to replace the cheap coal and the cheap gas by expensive heat pumps and other technologies which are not yet completely competing on the price level, which is true. You will tell me, is it true? Is it not true? There is some truth in it. There is some truth in it, but the story does not end there. And the problem is that those that are capitalizing on this narrative stop there. That's it. And it makes it extremely difficult to speak of midterm, of long term, of the benefits of decarbonizing, that eventually, indeed, you will be seeing it reflected in your energy bills as you replace the gas by the solar panels, by the heat pumps. But people see, and it's legitimate, but what is my cost now? So how do we go about it? So you need to go about it first. Legislation is important. If we structurally change the way, for instance, that prices are formed, if we indeed legislate in a way that renewable energy will manage to be the one setting the final price and not gas, as it is still the case. Now we have a new piece of legislation, the electricity market design, which leads to changes there. Legislation also with consumer provisions, which were part of the very ambitious set of legislation that was put forward and is now part of the acquis. For instance, for banning disconnection of citizens from their supply of energy. That is a strong provision. Or, for instance, to say energy communities, sharing of energy has now a role, is regulated. Is it enough? It's still not enough. We do need to have the financing tools that go and that help bridge this transition to say, well, if you really want people to renovate so that they can actually have proper and decent comfort at their homes, we need to help also with financing. And there have been unprecedented means, ironically triggered by COVID first, then by the war, where with the Recovery and Resilience Facility at EU level, unprecedented funds have been mobilized, and most of it is now going really into renovation, or if not a big chunk of it is going into renovation, insulation. So really helping people, because we cannot expect that those who are the ones most vulnerable really also have the means. So we have the Just Transition Fund, we have the Social Climate Fund, we have the Recovery and Resilience Fund, which are putting unprecedented means, which will eventually benefit the citizens. And then comes the big question is, and what about the technologies? And how do we strike the right balance between deployment, affordability, and competitiveness of EU industry? And then the issue is, well, if I want to decarbonize, I prefer to have the cheap solar panels from China, or the cheaper electric vehicle. Well, but at the same time, we need to maintain competitiveness, because competitiveness of EU industry is in the interest of all of us, to create jobs, to create growth. How we tackle that? I won't reply. I would wish you have good ideas, because I'm here also to listen.
Okay, Paula, thank you very much. What you do know is that panels are coming into Berlin and Germany and being rebranded as German solar panels. Same way we're getting oil and gas via Turkey branded as not Russian oil and gas. We know, so I think it's just important that we are frank and full with you that is what's happening. Basically, rebranding, a template being put on, say it's not from Russia and it's not from China. So that's, markets are leaky. The markets aren't something you can control with a lever, unfortunately, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with. But I suppose what I wanted to just, if I may, do just a hands up, right? In terms of, that people around you, perhaps not you, I don't know about your material circumstances. I'm talking about those who live in the poorest neighborhoods in Europe, who are making the choice between fuel and food. We know that, which sounds really, I know it's a naff statement, fuel or food, but that's the reality of it. And I don't think anyone in this room has had to make that choice. I don't believe, I hope not. But imagine you having to make that choice. Do you think more should be made of taxing the energy companies and passing it back directly onto the consumer as a reduction? Or do you think what's happening right now is okay? So the hands up. Should you tax the energy companies more to pass the profit directly back into the consumer? Yes or no? Hands up. Tax the companies more. Don't be shy. Put your hands up. Oh, and one on the panel. Great. Okay, let's take... Can you bring the mic here for me, please? We have a kind of, what would you call it? An undecided voter. So, sorry, go on. Just to liven it up. Say why.
I think...
Because, you don't have to be the dark child in the class where you're saying something, that's not part of the peer group. It's good to have the debate.
No, it's
on.
Sorry.
Say who you are.
Sorry, I'm Matthew Didry from Nuclear Europe.
Oh,
so
guess what? No, I'm joking. Go on.
No, I think it depends on the type of energy companies. I mean, you mentioned the oil and gas industry, and you mentioned the record profits they made. So, of course, it makes sense to tax them. Then if we're looking to go forwards with an energy transition where we try to incorporate more and more low-carbon solutions, would it make sense to tax the companies that are developing those solutions? I don't think so. So I think we should look at it in terms of which energy production is carbon intensive. And there I do agree that taxing these companies to help with energy prices would be a solution. But in the case of companies that are producing low carbon energy, I don't think that makes sense.
So a variable sense of kind of a more segmented approach to those who are performing on the issue don't have to be punished, but those who are not should be taxed, basically.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Because at the moment, the majority of them, unfortunately, according to the International Energy Agency, What's shocking about the fact that's come out this year is that most of the companies, the oil and gas companies, are investing more in fossil fuels in the next 5 to 10 years than they are on green tech and moving to a green energy solution. And I think one of the issues is that we have complete capacity in Europe to triple our renewables and our alternative sources of energy. We're just not doing it. But anyway, thank you for that little experiment, and it was good to know where you stand to a certain extent. And we'll come back in the discussion in a moment. Andres, over to you. Thank you for joining us. You've been, you've been long in the tooth in terms of politics, and also former commissioner of energy as well. And you're now with the Foreign School. You've done a number of things. Look back at what this mandate's done in terms of what you think when you were back in the day when you were a commissioner, and whether this kind of mandate that's closing has made strides or small steps. And what do you think the future holds, given where we've come from for the politics of the weekend?
No, I believe it's a huge step. It's a jump, what has been done. But before saying this, we should be also very open that fossil fuels that increase mankind's welfare is actually bringing now this energy poverty. It's not new technologies, neither it is a climate fight against climate change, at least at this stage, has not contributed at all to the poverty that we have. And in particular in Europe, it was very clear cutting supply of natural gas from Russia to Europe brought prices up and increased energy poverty. So for me, I think the quality of work of Europe was in addressing energy crisis and helping people to go through the winter, to help industries during this period. And at the same time, to create legislative framework that is the only one that responds what Secretary General of UN desperately calls for. Basically, we have carbon budget for 5 years, so by current emissions. So that's where the challenge comes, because you are trying to move faster than technological development and taxation system brings this balance. I will bring these 2 small examples from my country.
Okay.
So we don't have too much sun normally. And it was perceived by politics that there will be never solar panels. We have now installed 450 megawatt solar panels, and it is done by households, rooftop, then there are some small industrial, because the technology is very good. The conditions are not perfect, but still people see that the crisis and also climate change helps them to invest it. So the costs are interesting factor to move to this decision, because it's not government policies that drove them, but their own acceptance of it. And then negative example, where we could come on this social issue. There is a government policy to support people who buy electrical cars. So they cost roughly 30,000 euros, so you can get 4,000 euro rebate on it. Unfortunately, the people that are in energy poverty, they would never do this. And they are antagonized by this. They would better to say in France, there is a lease program that says 150 euro max that you need to pay for a month. Something like this, you need to think when you come to, you want to accelerate the policy. So far, Latvian government is right. But then you need to consider what overspill it will be. And the policies, when you use state aid, should be very well designed that they help people who are socially in more difficult situation, not just say, well, it's good for climate change. It's not good enough answer. And as a result, the people who really try to play on the worst emotions, they say, oh, you look, these electrical cars are complete rubbish. It's only for the rich, and you will be paying more taxes for it. So we need really to see how we design the policies, because making this jump to achieve zero carbon emissions by 2050 require a lot of state intervention. And if you would like to make it just, when you design the policies of state aid, you should really focus on these social aspects. Because if you don't do, you create political way against the whole Green Deal, the whole climate change action. And you can get to the result that you say, well, anyhow, we are doomed. We should not do anything. Perhaps we will survive. Perhaps science is wrong or whatever. And that, I think, is where the danger are. But in the development in the last 5 years, Europe could be proud what it has done. It created incentives even in the areas like maritime, like aviation, really to change the game. Not ambitious enough in some cases. In some cases, you could always argue, are the elements correct? But we will have a moment of truth. It will be national energy climate plans that will come out at the end of this month. And then we will see how things are. And there are always, you could look more positive or negative. The draft climate and energy plans have been seen as very weak. I would say for draft, not too bad, because they have seen 39.5 by 2030. I would expect from the draft plans worse results. So there is a drive, and that's why I'm coming back when we designed the program of 20% of renewables by 2020. It was seen with enormous skepsis. And now the drive is different. The drive is in the right direction. The difficulty is the time. We are trying to achieve something that corresponds what I would say world expects from us, that we can show that you can make this jump. And this where you could make mistakes, and these mistakes could cost politically.
I suppose, Andres, thank you. You've got an applause there. I think that, when I was listening to what you were saying, is that I completely agree that it's not been a tiny step, it's been a leap to a certain extent when we think just 5 years ago, where we were. But we've also gone through COVID. And, Society PLC globally was able to do things which are remarkable, like a vaccine, create hospitals, create a whole infrastructure for vaccination, communicating on phones, all the rest of it. Climate change is going to kill us if we're not careful. Why are we not employing the same kind of energy, mind the pun, to create renewables and alternative sources at a level and a scale that recognizes the pathway that we're on?
I think they're too difficult. First, climate change kills you slowly, like smoking. So you really need a ban. But to make a ban on a couple of things that you don't use fossil fuels, it goes too far.
Yeah.
We are not in
We're not
position
there.
to say this. So, and that's why you're coming with scarf measures. So that's where the difficulty is. The real measures are too difficult to take. And as a result, we try to build a system that is more acceptable. And that's where the mistakes are. Why oil and gas companies could do what they do? Because we are nearly only ones that are going so tough on carbon emissions. They see that there will be still need for oil and gas. They could invest, make profits. And with Europe, let's see how it will evolve. It's only a small part of the market. So the logic of them saying why we need to change the pattern if the world is not so much changing.
Indeed.
And we hope that, again, according to UN, the new national determined contributions coming early next year will be step change. And we see some changes in China, in India, but they are not big enough. And we need a leap to really change behavior also of this oil and gas companies.
Exactly, because we're not giving the marketplace the right signal, is what you're saying, at all. That's why I think these figures are shocking, that the companies are literally putting 80% of their future investment and growth into fossil fuels. Over 80%. And it's just shocking. But, let's say the person whose name shall not be taken, just like Harry Potter, as in, Voldemort, if he comes into power in November, let's say, and we see the move to the right here in Europe, do you see something really you're a politician, you can read the runes in terms of your own political fellowship, if you like. Do you think people are going to start halting? Do you think they'll start putting a brake on the Green Deal because they think people don't like it anymore and think it's too expensive? And also, our politicians are saying it's not real.
No, I don't see so far. But what I see is a step change. Because it's a lot goes with state aids, how you design state aid programs. Yeah. You just invest in somewhere else. So you lose again momentum. You don't reverse because you work on the people fears of change. People don't like change per se. And this is immense change, even also for governing revenues, because a big part is on the tax on oil and gas and on CO2. So it's immense change. You just say, well, for 5 years. We are not reversing, but we don't give so much authorization to new wind energy or solar, or we will wait for a couple of years. So you don't necessarily move backwards, but you don't support. And if you don't support, then you miss at the end of the day. And you're good enough for your electorate saying, we could not reverse what they built the windmills, but we will not build new ones.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose as ever in the world, you know, it'll be adversity that drives change, because all you'll need is multiple droughts, multiple shock, let's say, flooding across Europe, and the kind of, let's say, what we've seen in the past 2.5 years, right, in terms of extremities of weather. We've not seen anything yet, I don't think. I think it's going to get even worse. It'll actually be when you've got whole towns flooded and not be able to use water and electricity that will they'll push the politics potentially.
But there is this difficulty, because all your money would be then going to save people. So the difficulty is then you are stuck, because you need to save and you spend the resources that you have previously invested. And that this anticipation and moving forward in democracy is a challenging issue. In authoritarian, it could be done.
Indeed.
But in democracy, it's very, very difficult. So you need to use very good argument, and you need very good basis that support you.
Indeed.
If you don't have strong support basis, then you are dying out. And I would expect from civil society by far more stronger pushing this climate element, because if you don't push, then the part of politics that would always play on fears, they are winning.
Thank you. So good to have you on the panel. But you can say these things, having been where you've been. But, you know, there you go, the cost of inaction. Let's hope we don't have to suffer it too much. I'm now going to go to Ruth. You know, I love Duneworks. And, you know, you're someone who has basically said that having a multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder approach to the issues of a just transition and making sure that you've got this kind of broader ecology of community involved is important. Just for our people here who might be you might be preaching the converted here, but why? Why is it important, and what tools do you think we should be able to put into place or use? Thank you. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're not on mute?
No.
We hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I hear an echo.
No, you're fine.
I'm fine? Okay,
yeah.
Then it's only on my side. Thank you for this question, a difficult question as well. I think I would like to take you on a different kind of story also than the stories that we've heard so far, which are true in themselves. But let's not forget that we are facing a transition. And transition by definition is uncertain, it's complex, it's lacking leadership very often. And again, it's uncertain. Uncertain in the sense of the pathways that would prove to be good and the right pathways forward. And I think that might be already answer number one to your question as to why would we need or want multi-stakeholder participation and collaboration also in politics. And decision-making from the system level up to the very local level. And that has to do with the fact that if you want to make sure that whatever transition you're at, even embracing the uncertainties, you want to make it as just and as an equity type of transition as possible, you will need to include all the voices that might have feel impact of the decisions you're making. Because a transition, as I said, it's like Star Trek said, well, with a slight change, it's to boldly go where no human has gone before. We don't know where we're going. So you need travel companions that are diverse, that have a different set of skills than you do, that have different knowledge, different perspectives, that are able to combine both this system level and the lived experience level on the ground, in homes, etc. But you also need the dissident voices, those that say, what people do not want to hear, and the quiet ones, those that are finding it extremely difficult to be heard. And why? Again, to make it just, because only by allowing this diverse dialogue to take place in whatever decision making you're taking, you avoid, there are always unintended consequences, but at least you avoid unintended consequences that you could have foreseen if you would have involved this diversity upfront. And just to also make it a little bit broader, and I know that a lot of you might now start to think, okay, we just heard that democracy is slow. We perhaps need a more authoritarian type of approach to climate change. This is going to
That's
make
not
it
what
even
he said,
slower.
but never mind. I'll let you carry on. Go on, go on.
Just trying to create a story a bit
Good.
here. You might think, okay, involving all of these voices up front is going to slow down everything even further, even more. Yes, it will. But if you don't involve them up front, you will face a lot of potential resistance later on. There are so many good initiatives that might have been really, really good if they would have taken this diversity of voices in their decision-making and innovation processes up front that have been killed because of, and I don't really believe in the not in my backyard or not invented here, but those kind of mechanisms taking place. And what we've also seen is that in those instances that you indeed involve other types of perspectives, of voices, etc., into your innovation, into your policy, actually beautiful innovations emerge that would not have been possible otherwise. And just to even broaden the scope, I'm not only talking about human participation. Nature in itself could also have a fantastic voice at the table, and not in terms of climate change, etc. But for those of you that are interested, take a look at biomimicry. What we can learn from nature about how to innovate, both not only technological innovations, but also social and ecosystem and multi-level governance innovations. It's incredible. And there's so much for us to learn that can actually help accelerate the transition. So that's why I think diversity in all its forms is a key to accelerating instead of what you might think that it's slowing down.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much and it's good that, what we try and serve you up, ladies and gentlemen, is that we give you a multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder approach to the discussion. That's why we do have civil society organizations, academics, private sector, public, etc., just to make sure that we are able to have this kind of debate that comes at the issue from different perspectives. But I'm going to bring in some citizen voices for a moment. So we have a Debating Europe, which is part of our body, if you like. And in the past, let's say, tail end of last year, they spoke to 2,024 citizens. And we launched a report called Citizen Voices, 2024 Citizen Voices in February this year. So I'm going to quote from three, which are really quite interesting. So we have Davide from Italy, who says, why do we need electric cars? Why do we keep on thinking about the same mindset, with the same mindset, on and on? Instead of getting rid of cars, replacing them with electric cars. Why? Why can't we boost alternative mobility options over cars? He's between 21 and 30. We have Ulrika from Sweden, 38, woman. I work in a company where profits are crucial to our survival. If we are to have sustainable climate development, we must change our economic policy. We can't live in the entrepreneurial way where we are used to it because it requires more consumption, which we cannot afford. And then finally, a student from France, between 18 and 30, Grégoire, based in France. I have lots of my friends and I who don't turn on the heating because we and they cannot afford it, as of last year. So, interesting, see what, this kind of different generation are viewing it and the questions they're asking. I want to open up to you, if I may, just for 5 or 10 minutes, if you have any reactions or questions to the panel, but also to yourselves. And all I say to all of you, please make sure you introduce yourselves. And make it brief if you can.
Yes, thank you very much, Dharmendra. Pascaline Gabory, Pilot for Dev. I just have 2 comments. The first one is, so far, the European Union has been a pioneer and an example in terms of path to net zero with strong ambitions and exemplary also in the way of regulating and setting the standards for the rest of the world. Do you think that in the upcoming political landscape, we will be able to continue in this direction and to make sure that we also stick to our commitments and that we are able to be a model in terms of implementation also at the local level? And my second point is in terms of the path to sustainability, and I liked really much your inputs that there is no one solution, of course. I think all the researchers agree that there will be a mix and a kind of a pragmatic approach, which also makes necessary to have a long-term and short-term evaluations of what is working, what is not working, because there is no perfect solution, of course. Thank you.
Before you give up the mic, how are you hopeful? What's your sense? Because you're in the you've been in the civil society, academic research, all of that, and you've been here for some time. You've seen changes. What's your sense? Do you feel like this is an upheaval movement, or do you feel it'll just kind of peter away?
I think everything is possible, for the worse or for the best. So that's why I come here also to exchange with you, so that there are collective solutions popping up, maybe.
Okay. All right. Gentleman there and gentleman there. So. Chap there with the glasses.
Thank you. Oliver Rapp from BPI, the Buildings Performance Institute Europe. A question to Paula. We've heard that it's so important to bring everybody along in the transition. We know that at the bottleneck for that often sits in the national authorities. Now the national authorities have to implement all the files which were agreed in the Fit for 55 package. Can you imagine that the next Commission makes a step change in supporting member states in various ways to really deliver the transition and take their citizens along? Is there any, out-of-the-box thinking happening in the Commission to really have a different approach from what we've seen, in the past decades? Thank you.
It's an interesting question because a lot of people said that the mandate that's concluding has done a lot. It's created a big book, and everyone that we speak to say, and I suppose I should bring this to your attention, is our 10 policy choices, which is choices for the new mandate. And we've crafted it with over about 300 folk from all over Europe and the world to define what the next mandate should do. And one of them, we've said, is make this mandate the one of implementation. Because a lot of people are saying there's been so much, the book is thick, but stop regulating any further, but enable us to now deliver and make the next mandate a delivery mandate. But we'll go to Paula in a minute. Gentleman there. Was that little hand up, or were you just stroking your hair? Great, wonderful.
Thank you. My name is Pedro Homem de Gouveia. I work for a network of European cities and regions working on transport innovation. About being pessimistic or the outlook, I would quote Churchill, who I believe said, you have to be optimistic. It makes little sense to be anything else.
Okay.
I think we're forced to be optimistic. Just maybe a political question. One of the things, so I deal a lot with mayors and deputy mayors from across Europe who are pushing for to implement sustainable mobility measures, so low emission zones, bike lanes, etc., etc. And, well, certainly many of them are of the progressive types, green, center-left. And as Europe shifts right and as local and regional government remains very much center-right and conservative, one of the big challenges we strive to overcome is how can we make sustainable mobility and including the use of other sources of energy for transport, etc., appealing and interesting for the right. How can we make this transition appealing and palatable for center-right and conservative politicians? It's a question. Interestingly enough, just to give it a bit of spice, the other day I was talking to a deputy mayor, very conservative, and I was asking her this question, and she told me, I do it, I just don't brag about it. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that would be lovely if that was the case across the board, wouldn't it? It would be absolutely lovely. Lady there at the back, there with a hand up.
Hi, thank you. Noelani DeBeta from Climate Alliance, also a city network. I just want to say that following the elections, the questions that are coming to our mind now for cities and towns across the EU that are going to be where things are implemented from the Green Deal. So the Green Deal, a nice basket, we're happy with what's happened, and yet it's on the ground that you have to then cherry pick and try to make it all work. So we thought, okay, there are things that can always be improved. The energy governance regulation, we've been lobbying in the last while to say, let's reopen that and look at that and make it even better. But with such a far-right wind in the elections, we're actually, we would be now hesitating, saying, well, maybe we should just leave it as it is instead of opening up that Pandora's box. And so this is the sentiment we're sensing is like, oh no, we better just keep everything as it is since we won it this far, hard won, it's not perfect, then have a new European Parliament that would, block everything and that things become quite sticky and that you can't really build consensus to protect what we've already done. And again, I also agree with the gentleman who said, like, it is the time and your document for implementation and the financing for that. So, thank you.
Great, but there is something about self-fulfilling prophecies, isn't there? And that we must guard against that to a certain extent. And, I think that there's something about standing tall on what is important to all of us. And perhaps that's what's been missing about the European political debate, that people really haven't stood up and said what's right and what is important because we politics our way through it, especially at a political level. Paula, for your direct question, please, first.
Yes, very quickly, and I fully agree with Andries on this question, Oliver. I think there's no way back. The sense of direction is set very, very clearly. There is no way back. I think even more so after what is happening in Ukraine. People have woken up for the need for different reasons, not just for climate, for the transition. What can change is the pace. And indeed, so fully agree with Andries that what could happen is that we say, okay, but now let's put a bit of a break on some of the issues, some of the measures. That's where I see that there could be a change. And then in the one or the other, especially when we're thinking of legislation and where there are review clauses, this review clauses, and you mentioned the governance regulation, will need to be looked into very, very carefully because it's true. The moment you open it up, then you open a Pandora box, and then it could be seized. So I think this will need to be managed very, very carefully.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go to our next speaker because he's from a locality, and it's lovely to have the fabulous Anders with us. You're in a particular part of Europe where this matters, but it does elsewhere. But you've done things at a local level that perhaps it's not. We've done it with bravery and a coalition. And, we've said previously at Friends of Europe that cities are the drivers of change of the future because that's where the populations are, the major infrastructure is, and, the private sector is as well often. Give us your take in response to some of the questions you've heard, Anders, but also what you're doing locally, because it's important to have a bit of hope and optimism in this conversation.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. I am very much an optimist, and I'm also a centre-right politician, so I think it was a very interesting question that was here from the crowd. First of all, I think it's important for us to acknowledge, as is often said, all politics is local. This also means that no policy can survive if it doesn't work at a local level. Us as people who are in the municipalities, it is where the climate decisions becomes very, very concrete. It's about the house on the other side of my street. Should it have solar panel on top of the roof? On the street, should there be charging stations for EVs, even though it means that I may lose the parking space that I use? It's about how we design our cities, how we make sure that if there's a 100-year flooding event in Denmark that is already quite wet, how do we make sure that we can contain all the water so the houses is not underwater? This also means hard decisions about how we use our space, especially in the city municipalities, but actually also also in the cities that are not urban. I have a very great deal of respect for all the municipality and city councillors who may come from areas that are less progressive than us in the cities, but is actually leading the way in terms of the green transition. It is them that often greenlight the large renewable energy projects, even though they can be controversial in the local area that they are in. And to comment a little bit on some of the things that has been said, in my opinion, this is about bringing different sectors together. We need businesses that has good frameworks, so the green companies get more profitable than those who are not green, and we need politicians who actually have the courage to take a chance in terms of the green transition. But we also need citizens that are taken seriously. I think some of the times what gets wrong in the debate about the green transition is it becomes a discussion where there's a lot of wagging fingers, and to be frank, too little understanding of the situation the citizens might be placed in, where they have a hard life already, and they have a difficulty getting things together. They don't care about my lofty ideals or about that Denmark has some high goals about renewable energy or the green transition. They care about if I can make sure that they get a good, well-paying job and that they every day work out. And I think that's the scope that we sometimes lose. I would say, in terms of what is asked about how we can get the center right to participate more in this discussion, I think it's about making the discussion a lot more about how we can make green companies more profitable than those who are not. I mean, I'm a center-right politician. I care about creating better opportunities also for the companies. I think that's one of the ways we need to change this discussion, because actually, when I look at it, I think that it's not a question of whether our children should have a worse life than us. It's about making sure that they should have a better life, just a green life. And there's so many examples of this where European companies are leading the way. So I think instead of debating how we can make it more difficult, we should ask how can we make it easier for the green companies. Of course, an easy way of doing that is to put higher carbon taxes on the companies that are not moving in the green direction, and make sure that we use those money to create better incentives for green companies to proceed. So at the end of the day, I would say I am an optimist. I think that there's a big and a great green future ahead of us, also for the companies. We just need to continue in the path that we are, and we need to make sure that we have a serious discussion with our citizens, where we also take the issues they face at the local level seriously.
Sure. Anders, in terms of the kind of the issues that were raised in the room here about, do you feel that that you're feeling the sense, the emotional, political temperature in your city, but also Denmark, that there's a sense that we need to put the brakes on stuff and perhaps, go easy. Are you getting that sense?
No, but I would also say that in the Nordic countries, of course, the election was a little bit different than it was in many other European countries. The Green parties actually became larger, and we did not see a hard shift to the right. Yeah. And also, I would say I come from a center-right party. A lot of the center-right parties in the Nordic countries are engaging in this discussion, and is actually also quite active in making sure that our cities become greener. I have not the feeling that our citizens say we should put the brake on. In fact, I think that many of my citizens are asking us to speed up and to make this even more accelerated. And I think it's because that until now we have showed that it is possible for us to have heating and lights on while still being green, because we have central heating system, we have renewable energy, and if we push ahead on that, we can create a better future. So they're not against an accelerated green transition.
Sure. Just an example of the diversity of Europe. I wish we could cross-pollinate bits of you into the rest of Europe. It would be great. Thank you, Anders. I'm going to go to Stefan, because I'm going to run over a little bit. But and thank you for being so patient. You are someone who's been you're both an architect, but also design, but been really focusing on how we communicate Europe. And you've been looking at this over time. Has it got any better? And do you think, what do you think we need to do now, given what happened at the weekend?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and the excellent question. Indeed, it might be a bit strange to have an architect on this panel rather than more serious political figureheads. But as designers, I think we share some of the traits that could help us a bit see into the next steps. As architects, we are always somewhere between rationality and irrationality, where we have to translate sort of the irrationality of a client into an actual built structure that lives up to, let's say, gravity or other sort of fundamental aspects of life. We're also experts at losing. We are probably the best losers of Europe or of the world. 25% maybe at max will be built of what we propose. So in that sense, for all of who have lost, we can also feature as sort of experts and guide you on a path to winning, or to at least getting across particular elements. I happen to be involved slightly in energy in developing a master plan or a roadmap in 2009 with our architecture company, where we found that basically there was a lot of attention for pipes, for cables, for blades of windmills, and it was all fantastic and amazing, but like a foundational pillar was missing, and it is an energy culture. And I think that might be still missing to this day, maybe not only for energy, but a broader European culture. Indeed, also the Netherlands had an election last week. You obviously know of the dramatic national elections that happened last year, where obviously we were very nervous about these elections. And I have a small theory that the results were not as dramatic as expected, and I have a small theory about what happened. And I think it correlates with the European Song Festival. Basically that our contribution by Joost Klein, a 26-year-old artist who had an incredible song. Unfortunately, there was all kinds of issues, you know about it, in the actual performance, but the song was super pro-European and also super energetic and popular and lively at the same time. My little theory is that regardless of all the debates that happened and all the sort of the attention that was for the elections, this type of positive sentiment that came from this song, where he basically celebrated the joys of Europe and the virtues of Europe, rather than, say, the technocratic aspects of being this great European project, helped in supporting our votes. So I think it really shows us how incredibly foundational culture is, how much power there is in the hands of cultural sectors and creatives, artists, and that there is a fundamental question also to the Commission or to the European leadership to somehow improve this relationship with culture and with creatives, because they are there, they are willing, they're happy to sort of, they're mostly also really rooted in optimism. An architect, besides being a loser, obviously also has to be a fundamentalist in terms of optimism. So I would really call upon strengthening these ties and let us help you in this process of finding new directions.
So what's your advice to, let's say, let's not conjecture whether it's going to be Ursula von der Leyen or not, because it keeps on like going back and forth on that one. Especially that what was it Maloney said, it's far too soon to consider a second term for the madam, as she said just after the weekend, which I thought was quite startling. But what would your advice be then? Imagine you're the advisor on culture for the next president. What would you ask them to do?
I would advise them to be dramatically more daring in terms of how they collaborate with artists and cultural spheres. There are a few programs, for example, the New European Bauhaus. There is the first step to achieving a sort of a more connection with architects and designers, at least. I think it's maybe still a bit too much rooted in the technocratic directions and fully understandable and fully logical, but to create more excitement, to create more symbolism, to create more exploring of what we share together in terms of culture, good stories, fun, and to really celebrate Europe and try to avoid the pitfalls of overly, let's say, pedantic or boring communications. We just also mentioned that the last energy report was so heavily boring, and I'd rather not from you, of course. No, but at least to celebrate and to sort of excite each other again about all these challenges that go beyond sort of the technocratic spheres. And I know it's a very sort of difficult step to make.
But it's entirely possible. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, all of these people that you're speaking as politicians consume culture. Okay, they might do it at different levels, but they know what it does to them in terms of releasing of pheromones, being part of a community, enjoying visual and whatever. So they all do it, but they just understand that actually so does everybody else, and that has a power and an influence beyond their political reach almost. Would you create a European-wide cultural body? Is that a solution? I tell you what, let me explain why for a second. No, is that what I find, I mean, having, I was a very large funder in the UK, that was my last job, and what we found was that by releasing, let's say, up to £5,000 into small communities, had the better and a greater impact than $1 million into a community, because that money was used in such a creative way, and we realised that we could put arts and cultural elements into it, and the most magic connections happened between communities on streets that people never spoke to or crossed the road. And we facilitated that with only £5,000 per community. And we put hundreds of millions into it. But there is no such thing. There's no such facility in Europe for that.
Yeah, but at the same time, for example, the example of Joost Klein came uncommissioned. And that's obviously also has a very strong impact. So there is a need for a form of an independent form of support or a form of designing, so that it doesn't indeed avoids the traps of propaganda and enforces the ideas of connection, of the joy and just connecting within Europe and celebrating what we share.
So there's an element of let the marketplace of culture do its thing also, whilst you have a bit of management of the culture potentially.
Yeah, or unmanaging. I think it's also a part of unlearning. I think if we look in the mirror of also why sort of do some political parties flourish, or why are they so good, they're also at undoing certain elements, and that's maybe a virtue that is not considered enough. As architects, we always have to undo a lot of the things that we sort of also mistake. Mistakes is another element that we're very good at, and then we still have to somehow come up with a new proposal every time. So that's more of the proposal I would make.
No, sure, and I think at the heart of what you said over the years also, I remember working with you when we were in Barcelona, is that if you've got policymakers and, let's say, design merchants and different stakeholders in the room to address a problem, we might get a better solution at the end of the day.
Yeah, or put more in a great environment like a director general. Put more designers in, or just filter in them. I think that is also in support of Ruth's claim for adding sort of this type of cross-disciplinarity.
Indeed, he's not looking for a job, by the way. Paul is doing a really successful company. What do you? I would hire. Yeah, colleagues, I've run out of time. But any kind of last reactions to what you've heard? Any of you? No. On the culture thing, do you think, just hands up, do you think we should have more culture involved in policy making? That use the more cultural, influences, more sense of culture in the policy making processes? Yes or no? So that's the upward bit of battle you've got there. Look at that. And we've got young people in the room as well. Yes. Yes, exactly. Well, colleagues, thank you very much. And I just want to say to you, I mean, because you've, I come back to you very specifically because you have been a politician. You have watched what's happened at the weekend. Just share what you think, what lies ahead when you're thinking personally, thinking, actually, are we in a rot hole or are we going to move forward?
No, my experience is always positive. I remember, because when I came to college, there was huge upset with French referendum against European treaty. Everybody was so upset, deceived, and it disappeared. We found ways how to advance Europe. They have been on my agenda a couple of difficult issues that later work, like unbundling. Today you would speak with anybody. It's like ABC. At that time, you would like to expropriate enterprises. It's against business. It's complete madness to do. Today, it's common wisdom. is less popular is ban of incandescent light bulbs, because that's the first hard step towards dealing with emissions, because this was not so much appreciated. Even today, I would say, it goes against the freedom of people so a bit. So in politics, things evolve, and there are sometimes upsets, but if the other part has no constructive agenda, just saying, well, that's bad, you come back to solutions, because people would like to have better lives, better quality of life. And that, first of all, starts on local municipalities, starts on national. And Europe could make a huge support, like why we have managed so good through the crisis, and why costs have been less for citizens than it otherwise, because they have been interconnectors. They have been because they have been seed money from Europe. So if the same with culture, it's not you create a body, but if you have good programs like Bauhaus, very unbureaucratic as possible for accountability reasons, then you create a drive, and that works well. And in culture, I would say Europe is very well connected. If I see the people from cultures, they have partnering all across Europe, even beyond. So they are very well connected. Mayors are well connected. So we should be quite positive out of Europe. At the same time, we should mobilize against the views that are against our views. Like homophobia, like there are issues where you can't neglect and just say, well, okay, that's their views. No, if you really feel that it's against your basic values, you need also to protest, not just accept that, okay, that's another view. No, then you need really to speak out.
Vincenzo, thank you so much. I'm so glad I asked you, because you need that view. It's a kind of intergenerational view, actually, and it's positive that, believe in this, I suppose, the soul of human nature, because sometimes it can turn out to be good over time. And despite the difficulties, as you say, it was good to show the difficulties, and actually now we're in a very different place. The only issue, I suppose, the question we have as a think tank is that the pace of change is so much faster than we've ever witnessed in our history, and we are going to be facing things that history doesn't help us to learn from, if you like. And let's hope that we have the right people in the right place to achieve the kind of things. Thank you, Paula. I was going to ask you, but I won't, unless you want to make a final comment about you're a senior civil servant, right? You've been in the kind of system for some time. Is there a sense amongst you senior civil servants of a deep breath moment at the weekend? Can you even respond to that question? Actually, I'm thinking perhaps you can't.
Okay.
Okay. I'll let her off.
No, but of course,
yeah.
I mean, I think what drives us is the belief in the European project. And what is scary is to realize that many people don't realize how much we have achieved together. Let's think about it, because we are forgetting how much we've achieved together. For me,
Absolutely.
It's still one of the historically most incredible achievements. It's the EU and how we are brought together to work together, to love together, to face challenges together.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the most compelling example of how success is badly told. And, it's amazing that it's the things that have happened in Europe. If you were to explain to people on the streets that certain rights you have, certain approaches to life that you have come from the Commission. But it's the worst told success story. It's amazing that, we don't invest more in actually telling a story of the impact of Europe on everyone's lives, rather than having the lovely billboards outside the Parliament, right? And everyone canvassing day to day right now. Why can't it become a leadership competence of every MEP to do it every day, and to make sure there are, videos and visuals about the impact of the EU? But hey, let's see what happens. Perhaps at some point someone will come up and be creative and courageous. Thank you all for being here. I've taken more of your time than I should have, but thank you for being present and engaged. And let's see what happens in this early, let's say, time of the post-election sense of anxiety and unpredictability. But as Andres has said, perhaps good human nature will out. So take care. Thank you very much. Keep an eye on our website for our next event. Thank our speakers.